Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're cutting through the noise to really examine a concept that crops up everywhere. Optionality, basically. Freedom through flexibility.
So that's right. We've got a stack of sources here, and they don't just frame optionality as, a smart financial tactic. They actually call it the silent architecture of freedom.
The silent architecture of freedom. I like that.
And our mission today is really to unpack that. How does this structure give you real antifragility? That ability not just to withstand chaos, but maybe even benefit from it.
And get that long-term edge in a world that's, well, let's face it, fundamentally unpredictable.
Exactly.
The thing that really grabbed me from the start was this core idea. Flexibility is intelligence when you can't predict what's next. If you accept that foresight is, frankly, limited, then setting yourself up for many possible futures, keeping those options open. That seems to be the key difference.
So it separates the people who kind of flow with disorder from those who just freeze up when their one rigid plan falls apart.
So where do we start unpacking this? The sources seem to point towards one core mathematical idea.
Yeah, we really have to start with the math of it. Optionality absolutely thrives on asymmetry.
Okay, asymmetry. Let's dig into that, because I think our intuition often pushes us towards balance, doesn't it? Like low risk, maybe medium reward.
Right. We want things neat and tidy.
But optionality seems to celebrate imbalance. It's all about having a very limited, survivable downside.
Usually survivable.
Matched with a potentially massive, almost unlimited upside.
That's the engine of the whole thing, because you have that imbalance. The cost of trying something and failing is small. You can live with it. But the payoff, if you succeed, is, well, transformative.
It changes the game.
Right. It means you don't need a crystal ball. You don't need perfect foresight. One source even calls optionality a substitute for intelligence.
A substitute for intelligence. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. You don't have to be right most of the time. You just need to set things up so that when you are right, the gains are big enough to cover all the little misses.
Okay, but let's get practical. How do we define limited downside in the real world? It sounds good on paper.
Sure.
But, when someone's trying things out, an entrepreneur, an investor, and they hit a string of small losses, how do they actually survive that? Emotionally, financially?
Well, that's where the discipline kicks in, isn't it? Survivability is absolutely paramount. Think about nature, evolution.
Okay.
Nature runs, countless failed mutations, right? Thousands, millions maybe, for that one adaptation that completely changes the game for a species.
And the system itself doesn't collapse from all those failures.
Exactly. The system handles those discarded attempts because the cost of each one is tiny compared to the massive exponential reward of the one that works.
And you see that mirrored almost perfectly in, say, high-risk areas today, like venture capital.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The standard VC model expects something like 9 out of 10 investments to basically fail, or at least not deliver spectacular returns.
They know going in they'll lose money on most individual bets.
Right. They're consistently losing small amounts. But that one unicorn company in the portfolio, that single transformative success, pays back the losses on all the others, and then some. It's inherently a strategy built on patience and asymmetry.
Or, you mentioned Warren Buffett. We think of him as a value guy finding cheap stocks. But underlying that is this optionality strategy of extreme patience, right? He protects his downside like crazy, always keeps cash.
Loads of cash, yeah. Dry powder.
And then waits, maybe for years, for what he calls that fat pitch, that one perfect low-risk, high-certainty opportunity.
He's optimizing for the massive, almost undeniable payoff, not for being busy making lots of trades.
And that connects to entrepreneurs too, doesn't it? Like the Amazon example is fascinating.
Yeah, think about how Amazon grew. Bezos wasn't sitting there predicting exactly what the internet would become in 20 years.
No, seems impossible.
He was multiplying experiments, trying lots of little things, keeping the initial cost low, like AWS, Amazon Web Services, started as just an internal tool to solve their own scaling problems.
Right, just for themselves initially.
Yeah. He designed the system so that unexpected, random upside could be captured later on. He created exposure so the future could reward Amazon, whatever shape that future took. Optionality is about positioning yourself to benefit from what you don't know.
Okay, so that's how it works in these big external systems, evolution, finance, business building. But, and this is where I think it gets really interesting for everyone listening, how do we bring this inward?
The mindset.
Yeah, it's not just structures. It's a psychological approach, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do we actually cultivate an optional mindset in our own lives?
It takes, well, a couple of key things. Definitely humility and courage.
Humility and courage. Explain that.
Humility, because you have to start by genuinely admitting, that you cannot accurately predict the future. You just can't know exactly how things will turn out.
Which goes against a lot of our planning instincts.
Totally. And then courage, because even with that uncertainty, you still have to act. You have to keep experimenting, making those small bets, exploring possibilities. It's not about getting lucky passively. It's what some sources call design serendipity. You're engineering the conditions for good fortune.
Design serendipity. I like that. It implies agency. It implies action.
Exactly. You're building the net, hoping a good fish swims by.
And this really changes how we react to volatility, to disorder, doesn't it? The sources seem to highlight 3 different ways people respond.
Yeah, that contrast is really useful, I think. You've got the fragile person, they fear disorder, chaos breaks their plans, threatens their single path, they want stability above all else.
Okay, then the second.
Then you have the resilient person, they can take a hit, they endure the shock, maybe they get knocked down, but they bounce back. Usually back to where they started.
Right, they recover.
But then there's the antifragile person, the one who's truly embraced optionality. They don't just endure disorder, they almost seek it out, or at least they see opportunity in it.
Why? How does that work?
Because for them, every shock, every unexpected event isn't just a problem, it's data.
Yeah.
It's a stress test for their system. It's potentially a trigger for a new, better path or a chance to gain leverage.
Okay, but let's push on that a bit. If we're constantly exploring new things, new skills, new projects, new connections, isn't there a real danger of becoming, scattered, a jack of all trades, master of none?
That's a fair point. The dabbler risk.
Yeah. How do you cultivate all these diverse options lightly, as the sources say, without just diluting your focus so much that you never achieve anything substantial?
That's the balancing act, absolutely. The key concept seems to be lightness, defined as low sunk cost and high exit velocity.
Exit velocity.
Yeah, how quickly and easily can you pivot away if something better comes along, or if it's just not working? You commit your curiosity, maybe some initial time and energy.
But not your entire identity or life savings.
Exactly. So maybe you spend 6 months learning basic coding. You do it knowing that if halfway through a totally different, amazing opportunity pops up in, say, writing, you can jump ship without feeling like you've wasted everything.
So the commitment is provisional.
It's provisional. Every little exploration is a potential lever for a future you can't predict yet. And the person with optionality keeps their identity light too. They might commit to achieving an outcome, but they don't marry the specific method of getting there.
That idea of keeping your identity light,
Yeah.
that feels profound. It means you're not just your job title or your relationship status or your current project.
Precisely. It builds psychological flexibility. If one role disappears or one path closes off, your whole sense of self doesn't crumble along with it.
Which feels much more
Yeah,
antifragile.
definitely.
Okay, so that idea of lightness, of branching out instead of a single track, leads perfectly into this concept of life as a portfolio, not a single grand plan.
Yes, the sources really hammer this point home. Stop thinking linear career path, start thinking diversified life portfolio.
So what does that diversification actually buy us in terms of freedom?
Well, fundamentally, it buys us something like biological certainty. Optionality is just deep wisdom borrowed from nature.
How so?
Nature almost always rewards branching structures over straight, single lines. Think of a tree.
Okay.
A tree survives storms and disease, not by being a single rigid pole, but by branching out wide. If lightning hits one major branch, sure, it's damaged, but the rest of the organism usually survives and keeps growing.
Right, the whole system doesn't fail.
Exactly. And that's why redundancy, which often looks really inefficient on, say, a corporate spreadsheet,
Yeah, excess capacity, waste.
it's actually brilliant survival engineering in the messy real world.
So how do we square that apparent inefficiency, that cost, with the freedom it ultimately gives you?
You have to accept that a degree of perceived inefficiency is basically the insurance premium you pay for resilience, for longevity.
Like having 2 kidneys.
Perfect example. Or 2 lungs. Or having multiple, maybe smaller income streams instead of one huge one. It looks like overkill, like wasted effort, until one fails.
And then it's suddenly genius.
And it's the thing that saves you. The optional person accepts that they might need to invest time or resources in ways that don't show immediate linear returns because they're building robustness against the shocks they know are coming, even if they don't know when or what they'll be.
So let's make that redundancy concrete. How does it apply in different areas? Assets.
Okay, assets. Diversification isn't just stocks versus bonds. It might mean owning different types of vehicles for different conditions, like a fuel-efficient car for commuting and maybe a WD for bad weather or rough terrain, or spreading property investments across different types of markets or even regions.
And in terms of skills or career,
The broader your skill set, the more paths are open to you. If you can write well and do some basic coding and negotiate effectively and speak publicly, you're much harder to trap.
because if the system supporting one skill, say, your specific industry, tanks.
You have other avenues. You're not dependent on that single, potentially failing system.
And perhaps the most striking application of this portfolio idea is around sovereignty, mobility.
Oh, yeah. Owning exits. This is a big one in some of the sources.
What does it mean, owning exits?
It could mean having multiple passports or residency rights in different countries. Essentially, having the option to move if your current environment becomes unstable or undesirable. It's using mobility as a form of insurance.
So global uncertainty, which causes anxiety for many.
Can become a source of personal flexibility for the optional individual. Just knowing you could leave, even if you never actually do, fundamentally changes your psychological relationship with your home base.
Yeah.
It reduces that feeling of being trapped.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, underpinning a lot of this physical and psychological movement, there has to be some financial reality, right?
Yeah.
Financial optionality seems critical. What's the absolute bedrock principle there?
Low fixed costs, period. The sources are incredibly emphatic about this. One quote was something like, "Low fixed costs are the soil where options grow."
The soil where options grow,
Well,
right?
If your baseline monthly expenses are really high, huge mortgage, expensive car payments, tons of subscriptions, high overhead lifestyle.
You're forced onto a treadmill.
Exactly. You're under constant pressure just to maintain the status quo. If you have to earn, say, $10,000 every single month just to break even, you lose the freedom to take risks. You can't afford to pivot easily. You can't afford to wait for that really good asymmetric opportunity.
But let's be real. In today's world, especially if you live in a major city, keeping fixed costs genuinely low is, well, it's really hard. It feels like a direct trade-off against comfort, convenience, maybe even status.
It is a trade-off, no question. High fixed costs are essentially, you could say, a debt you owe to predictability.
A debt to predictability.
Yeah, they force you to keep showing up, maybe at a job you don't even like. Because the cost of not doing so, the cost of failure, feels catastrophic. You can't afford a gap in income.
So you miss that fat pitch opportunity we talked about earlier.
Because you're too busy swinging at every mediocre ball thrown your way just to cover this month's bills.
Which is why liquidity, having cash on hand, isn't just about safety. It's strategic.
It's strategic leverage, absolutely. Cash reserves aren't lazy money. They represent strategic patience. It's your dry powder waiting for volatility.
Okay, explain that link to volatility.
Well, liquidity buys you time. And time is perhaps the ultimate option when markets crash or a personal crisis hits or a unique opportunity appears.
The person with cash has choices.
Exactly. They shift from defense to offense. They can step in and buy assets cheaply when everyone else is panicking and forced to sell. They can invest in a new venture. They can afford to wait out the storm. The optional person uses liquidity to play offense precisely when the world seems most defensive.
Okay, fantastic. Now let's take that same principle, flexibility, diversification, low dependency, and apply it internally to the mind. Psychological optionality.
Right. Because just like your finances or your career paths, your mind should also be diversified.
What does that mean, a diversified mind?
It means avoiding dependency on a single worldview, one rigid ideology, or one way of thinking. That's fragile. If evidence emerges that contradicts your core belief system and you have no alternatives,
Your world can shatter.
right, the antidote is to actively expose yourself to different perspectives. Seek out opposing arguments, read things you disagree with, engage with uncomfortable ideas. It builds what you might call cognitive antifragility.
So when one mental model proves inadequate,
You have others ready to deploy. Curiosity replaces the fear of being wrong. Intellectual challenges become fuel for growth, not threats to your identity.
and this extends into our emotional lives too, relationships. How does optionality work there without sounding, cold or non-committal?
It's about ensuring connection comes from choice, not from need. Emotional optionality.
Okay.
Think about it. Dependence feels like security, maybe, for a while, but it very quickly can become a form of captivity, can it?
Yeah, if you feel you can't leave, even if things are bad.
Exactly. A self-sufficient person, someone who has cultivated multiple sources of meaning, validation, and support in their life. They can engage in relationships deeply, but they can also walk away from a toxic dynamic without complete personal collapse.
It mirrors the diversified investor who isn't ruined if one stock goes to zero.
Precisely. It means you have multiple channels for fulfillment. You're choosing to be in a relationship or a friendship or a community because you want to be there, bringing your whole self, not because you need it to feel okay or validated. The choice itself is empowering.
Okay, so if we try to pull all these threads together now, the asymmetry, the redundancy, the liquidity, this idea of a light identity, what's the core message? What's the optionality manifesto, so to speak?
I think it boils down to this. True freedom isn't measured by how much stuff you own. It's measured by your ability to move, to adapt, to pivot, and if necessary, to start again.
So it's about capacity for change.
Yeah. The optional person keeps their identity relatively light, their fixed obligations even lighter, but their curiosity is heavy. They're always exploring, always building potential new branches.
And just knowing you have those other branches, those potential exits.
Yeah.
That must drastically reduce the feeling of desperation, right?
Yeah.
Which clouds judgment.
It's the ultimate antidote to panic, I think. As one of the sources put it quite well. The fragile panic when one road closes, the optional simply take another.
Simple as that.
True freedom is not foresight, it's flexibility.
Flexibility beats prediction. Which leaves us with the final thought, something for you, the listener, to maybe chew on.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about how building these multiple paths, these exits, creating optionality, reduces that desperation. And how that lack of desperation allows for patience, the strategic patience to wait for the truly great asymmetric opportunity.
Right, the ability to wait for the fat pitch.
Exactly. So here's the paradox to consider. How does all this activity exploring, building skills, creating options ultimately lead to potentially the most powerful choice of all? The choice to sometimes do nothing. To wait patiently until the odds are overwhelmingly stacked in your favor. Perhaps true freedom often looks less like frantic action and more like the quiet confidence to wait for the right moment.